I think it's time for us to kick this off. So again, we're here for Reinvent Your Revenue Lifecycle, a business critical implementation. Thank you to the Conga team for holding this. I know this topic's really relevant right now, and I'm going to kick it over to you all to do introductions. Thanks for being here.
I'll get started. Hi, my name is Aisling Finnegan. I am the VP of Product Strategy and Transformation here at Conga. My journey with Conga actually started off as a customer. I was in a sales operations role where we were creating a whole new end-to-end experience. In our journey, we implemented a CPQ tool, a CLM for legal, a back office finance system for the finance team. Basically, we reinvented the whole process and we did it all at the same time. That project had so many learnings that I now spend the majority of my time working with Conga customers on their transformation journey, taking on the things that I would never do again that I did, and the things that worked really well. So yeah, I'm very passionate about revenue operations, all things technology and all things transformation.
Awesome. I can also kind of follow you up here, Ash. So Jordan Heisel, I'm the VP of the Business Account Management Group, which really focuses on building transformational and strategic pipeline for the organization, as well as closing out the transactional deals. I have been with Conga for a little over 6 years, so a similar long tenure in the Conga journey, and really have had a number of different hats and multifaceted roles in terms of sales and marketing operations. So similar to yourselves, where a lot of them are moving to the go-to-market team, kind of have an understanding of those different business areas and how they all work together. So look forward to the conversation today, and I'll kick it over to Damar.
Hey everyone, Damar Amaker, Senior Director of Business Operations at Ziff Solutions. I've really been on this sort of sales ops, rev ops journey for the majority of my career. Started about 11 years ago now. It's kind of crazy to think that this journey has been sort of maturing and kind of carrying on for this long. But glad to see some familiar faces out there. I've done a couple of these and really excited for this revenue lifecycle management conversation. I think it's a really great topic and really a poignant one considering everything that's going on in the world today. So great to be here with Ash and Jordan, and looking forward to all the engagement from the attendees.
Should we go straight into the presentation? Let's kind of start on the topic. So as I said, my journey started off as someone who had to do a project where streamlining, trying to accelerate sales, align teams, processes, and systems. So when I came to work at Conga, I was really excited about obviously the level of technology we have, but really the problem we solve for customers is everything around revenue operations. Revenue lifecycle management is more about the how you can do successful revenue operations. Revenue lifecycle is all around how we align our teams, processes, and systems to drive operational excellence across the selling and buying experience. And what we mean by that is for the people who are selling for your organization, but also that customer experience and what their experience is like from buying from your organization. And it's all about delivering profitable revenue growth and increased customer lifetime value. So it's this end-to-end connected customer experience. And when we define revenue kind of life cycle, we kind of break it into 4 key quadrants to help our customers understand where they might be having some pain. So for example, the first quadrant is all around and how an organization, I've gone ahead, will propose and quote. And this is all about sales teams and how they configure the right product for the right price for the right customer, and making sure they have all the information they need to get the right information to the customer seamlessly and ahead of competitors. Then it's all about how an organization will then negotiate and execute on the contracting, how to bring legal teams in and make it a seamless experience that they don't create bottlenecks in the sales process, and we can actually execute and accelerate contract negotiations, right around to how an organization will manage and fulfill all of those contracts, whether it's through order management, obligations, billing, revenue recognition. It's all about making sure they fulfill the obligations, so then it can go to the customer success teams where they can renew and expand with customers. We all know everybody's trying to increase that customer lifetime value, so trying to making sure they can upsell, renew, and grow their customers' revenues is really a top priority. So this is how we define revenue operations, like from a revenue lifecycle management. We're trying to get organizations to see that this is a continuous life cycle. It's not just like a quote to cash journey. It's all about getting all of the sales, legal, finance, fulfillment teams, and customer success to work together to make sure they create this connected customer experience, share data and information, and give the ultimate customer experience. Damar, from your perspective, obviously, this is how we define it. You know, if you're going to work with you a little bit on it, you know, from your perspective, does this resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of why RevOps to me even exists in general, right? Was these disparate conversations that were going on across the organization for years that, you know, included the obviously the customer success teams, that, you know, obviously you're talking, you know, the initial sale. I think that a lot of times you know, that becomes the same conversation, you know, in a renewal cycle and an upsell cycle. So just like, for me, it's really end to end the same conversation, just depending on, you know, what part of your organization handles that particular subject area. But to me, RevOps and sort of this revenue lifecycle idea, it brings it all together, right? It's you know, from the customer's perspective, in my opinion, they don't see 10 you know, teams working on these, you know, these things internally. They see their contract with one vendor, and for them, they're that one person that's trying to make sure that that's, you know, managed on their side. So I think as much as you can limit the amount of touch points down to sort of one, you know, one place for a customer, the better, so that they're not feeling like, you know, they're being the baton that's passed from, you know, from implementation to customer success to finance to billing to procurement. It's just too much for one for, you know, for the customer to handle, I think.
Yeah, and it's so great, because one thing I don't know if you find is every time I meet with a customer and I talk about the experiences I had and the challenges and the problems, we all seem to have the same challenges, like the nodding of the head of disconnected teams, you know, disconnected systems, people just not collaborating together, data in the wrong format. We spent a lot of time arguing over what are the right numbers rather than what to do about the numbers, because we were searching for the right data and information. You know, Jordan, you have a lot of experience working directly with our customers and their pain points, and some of them will come in and maybe land and propose and quote, and we often try to tell them, please don't just build for a department, you need to build for a business. So whatever you're doing, whether it's a CPQ implementation or getting your proposal and quote and accelerating your sales team, you've got to make sure that you build it to work with the other teams. You know, do you see a lot of that when you're dealing with our customers? It's an education piece to say, I know CPQ is huge and it's a big product, but please make sure it works for the business, not just for one department.
Yeah, absolutely, Ash. So I think that that's a really good point, right? It's, of course, many organizations right now we're trying to digitally transform. We're trying to, right, we're unifying some of the teams under a RevOps hat, or we're looping in these other departments as a part of our initiatives and projects. But where sometimes we don't have that connective tissue is the processes and the tools and the operations that we utilize together, right? Between our CPQ and our CRM and our ERP and all of these things that we're investing in, we're building in between each of these departments or parts of our customer lifecycle, they're still a little bit disjointed. And so what happens is we feel it on the internal side, right? Working cross-functionally as we hand off between our customer journey. But in turn, we actually are also having that impact on our customers' journeys, also that little bit disjointed. So oftentimes when we talk to customers, first we hear about, you know, what are your current challenges today? Where are you today? But then let's also open up overall. Let's hear about your customer journey. Like, walk us through each of these phases together of someone comes in and becomes a customer, and then how do they actually walk through that process of becoming a customer and the back end there. And also let's think about it from, you know, we hear about the pain points internally, and then oftentimes those are also, it's almost like a reflective mirror and the impacts that they have on an external customer. So those things work almost in tandem, close together, but I think it's getting those processes really unified. But we're getting better, working and looping people into teams, but the processes and the operations, I think, is where that connective tissue still has a little bit to go.
Yeah, and I think when I did my transformation journey back 6-7 years ago, RevOps wasn't a thing, you know, but one thing I learned was everyone asks me today, the big question they ask is, how do I do it in my organization? And I guess I didn't have the theory of RevOps, but I guess what we did in our project was I create a cross-functional team. So I didn't have a RevOps leader because it wasn't a thing as much, particularly in the UK at that time. So I had a cross-functional team that was made up of someone from sales, someone from legal, someone from finance, someone from customer success. And as we looked at our end-to-end process, but I remember buying the technology. I had some CPQ from one vendor. I had CLM from a different vendor. and I had someone else doing the finance. And I remember getting them in a room, and I had 3 different implementation partners. And I literally said, you're all one team. So I brought the 3 partners in together, and I was like, you need to operate as one team. And I know the world has moved on. Many vendors like Honga will give so much of the solution from one vendor. But for me, the challenges I faced bringing everyone together, there was a lot of blame, and this, like, finance were very upset with sales because they thought they just will sell anything, create any rules, and they're left to clean up the mess and can't correct revenue. I had legal teams who felt that all their salespeople were risk takers and would break all the terms and conditions. So there was a lot of friction in the first few meetings on is more about why it's so wrong today. And it was so hard to get the team to focus on not where we were, but where we wanted to be. What is the ideal state? And then what are the paths we can take to go from chaos to something that was a lot more streamlined? And it was actually really hard. Damar, have you got some of those experiences where, bringing these teams together, it's not very easy when they've all kind of been traditionally working in silos before?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that I think, and like every RevOps professional, I think, has, unique challenges, but I think that's one that we all share from just a unifying kind of charge and remit, right? So to me, it's, when it's no one's responsibility to gather those, those parties and unify those parties, it kind of, falls on, the first leader that wants to kind of step in charge of doing that. And that, sometimes is the chief revenue officer, but then they're quickly backed up by, a RevOps person that, can help, wrangle some of those processes and systems. So I think it's never too late or never too early to really have that foresight when you're putting those teams together, because I think, depending on the size that you are, sometimes specialization could be, the right move for you, right? Having someone that's very, has a strong background in building out a CPQ or a CLM product. But, when you're thinking holistically, early on, I think you really want to make sure that those things are put together in the right way from the beginning, if you have that flexibility. And, or if you're going back to Jordan's point, if you are in the middle of a digital transformation, really stepping back and looking full picture and realizing, wow, this hand's not talking to this, this foot over here, or, the body really needs to be a connected system. And I think that RevOps kind of serves as that central nervous system. And whatever systems you're using, you really need to make sure that you have someone owning that and really looking at it from the perspective of sales, looking at it from the perspective of marketing, looking at it from the perspective of finance. Because if you don't, then you are going to end up with this Frankenstein of 3 territorial leaders leading 3 different systems that don't necessarily all want to be stepping on each other, right? Because sometimes the integration is there where it's a seamless integration, but sometimes it's purposeful, right? You see systems that they see that as a scope creep for that other use case. So why would they want to make it easier for them to have part of their mind share taken away, right? So I do think that it's you have to get the egos out of the room in some ways.
Yes.
Also, you need to have someone that's thinking about the big picture in general.
Yeah, and that's all about culture change, which is like 50% of transformation projects fail because of cultural transformation, i.e. people, the executives, the people on the project wanted to change the business, but the business didn't want to change. And a lot of that happens is because people are not included. They're not asked their opinion. They're not involved and engaged. And one of the advice I always give to many people on the transformation, do ask, because I would work with leaders and they say, this is what they do. And then I'd go into the business. And I spend a lot of my time going back to the leaders, go, you see that thing they do? No, they don't do that. They use Excel spreadsheets and they can't stand the system. And they actually break most of the rules you have in place today. So getting that common communication of understanding at the exec level and the project level what you want to achieve, but don't forget to deep dive and understand what the users are actually doing on a day-to-day basis. That will give you the real life scenario, which took me to a place where when I understood my real life scenario, I actually thought I didn't want to touch the project, because when I looked at what I needed to do and what I had to unravel, and like you said, all of the personalities, there was this fear factor of, I don't know if I can do this. How can we get to this place when it's so broken. Like, it was so broken for me. Like, we had salespeople creating SKUs and inventing products. The contracting was so bad. I actually had to ask a customer, do you have a copy of the contract? Because I don't. You know, this was the state of my real world. And I had so many systems. Our finance system went down. It didn't just go down, it went missing. I couldn't find the finance system. So before I knew I couldn't get invoices out, I had to find where the system was somewhere in Germany. So it was, for me, kind of looking, going, how do I get to this ideal state? Which takes us to our next topic, which is why we're seeing why revenue operations is accelerating. Yes, I had all of these problems, and then the fear of what I had to do made me think I shouldn't do anything. Let's keep it as it is, because I'm so terrified, you know, there's so much to do. But a lot of our revenue lifecycle is accelerating, and organizations are now responding to market challenges and increasing customer demands. There's a lot happening in the world. We know driving revenue is becoming more and more challenging, particularly at the market level when we're seeing slowing growth. You know, there is an economic slowdown. So many organizations now are reducing their staff. They're cutting back on resources and spend, but yet they want to do more. So how do you help an organization do more with less? You know, so it's a huge challenge. And there's also margin pressures. There's no control on costs anymore, because everyone is passing their cost on to the customer. And that's just a chain effect. You know, there's also global supply chain post-COVID. Most organizations are still kind of catching up on making sure they have what they need to be able to sell it to the right people. And then when we look at the other side, we can see that customer demands are getting accelerating, you know, and business demands, whether organizations now are looking to introduce new business models. How many organizations now are trying to introduce like subscription business model? You know, we've so many of our customers that did physical assets now trying to sell digital. That's a complete change in how they sell, how they operationalize. How can they easily introduce a new business model with a new product to a new market, to a new audience? They're trying to create more omni-channel experiences and actually be able to meet customers where they are. COVID, we've seen an acceleration in e-commerce, particularly in the B2B space. Organizations that didn't sell online are now having to sell online. Customers want more increased personalization. I want you to know who I am. I want you to recommend the right products. I don't want to talk to you forever, and I want it to be quick. So organizations, it's all about efficiency and productivity. How do we get our teams, processes, and systems to respond to customers who want to buy across multiple channels, sometimes on the same buying journey, increase personalization, and they want to accelerate contracts. But most of all, we're seeing organizations want data. They want revenue intelligence. You know, it's such a big thing. All the demands on businesses now are making them need to transform. Damar, from your perspective, are you seeing any of these trends with the people that you're working with?
Yeah, it's interesting that you went the direction of sort of omni-channel, right? Because you know the Zift business in general is there to support and enable the partner ecosystem. So we see this very frequently in our business, the shift towards channel ops being sort of this necessary part of revenue operations, and sort of how you include your partners in your communications and in your channel, and then there's that sort of two-way street of the data, right, that they need to support their businesses. And really, you said it perfectly. Revenue intelligence is the name of the game, right? And when you think about the you know, the extension of your brand into, you know, other channels, you really do have to be mindful of the, you know, the consistency and the, you know, just the overall, you know, zipped upness that you have when you're reaching across these new business models. And I think you can only really do so if you have a consistent view of what that data looks like. And you know, for me, it's really a whack-a-mole, right? You're never, I think, going to solve, you know, all the challenges, but you know, having something flexible that you can iterate upon from a process and systems perspective really gives you a fighting chance at being dynamic, you know, moving into the future and as things change.
Yeah, and it's really key. Like, Jordan, I know you work with a lot of our customers. We talk a lot about the unified data model. You know, and that's when we say, even if you're building CPQ, have all your specialists on your CPQ, but know all of that product pricing, all of that data needs to move to a legal team, needs to go to your finance team, and it needs to go to your customer success to be renewed. So when we talk about building for a business, not just a department, what we're really focusing on is make sure you can send customer data to different teams. And if you can automate that and streamline that, they might be on different systems, but the faster that information gets to the different teams means the customer buying journey starts to accelerate. Is that something, Jordan, you're hearing a lot from our customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And oftentimes we take, a customer pain point or issue, right, and actually kind of extrapolate that up, right? Because so often it ties back to a customer demand or a larger market challenge. And I think to what Damar said earlier, right, is once you unpack where is a business, right, where do you need to go, right? Where's your goal as a big picture? And then what is the actual issue, right? The customer issue or demand that you're trying to solve for? Because so often when I have someone come in and they're struggling with their SKUs or approval processes, right, it really extrapolates out to a much larger component. And how do we actually fix this and in loop in organizations? And I think it also helps get that cross-functional buy-in, because if people know the how and the why, they're more willing and adaptive to the change management as they continue forward. And in the pace of organizations, right, even to where they were 5 years ago, you have to move at a faster pace, and you have to have that ability to transform. And so as organizations move, it's no longer of, oh, we can look at this project in a year, 2 years, right? It's how do I do this today? How to do it quickly, but we also have to make sure we're doing it the right way and including all of these departments. So I think that's the balancing act for a lot of organizations, but having that big picture and the big goal and then extrapolating the processes that go underneath it makes it easier and scalable to go there.
Yeah. So based on that, these are some of the trends we're hearing from our customers and kind of from the industry experts of omni-channel because of COVID, personalization, data, contract accelerations, being more efficient in productivity, introducing new business models so you don't lose your market share against a new entrant into your market. We're going to do a quick poll right now, just to see and ask you guys, what are the pressures that you're seeing, or maybe the top one out of what we're seeing, or if you're seeing something else. So if you guys can all just click on your answer on what would be the most common thing and, that's driving your transformation project, what would you select from the list that you can now see? I don't know how the polling works, guys. So Damar, you're going to have to help me on this one. You probably got more experience. How do we know when it's done?
Give it a couple moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're about there. 72% of you have participated. Anybody else want to get their opinion in?
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it. It helps us drive the conversation if we know where you're focused. So we do this for a reason. Maximize efficiency and productivity, revenue intelligence. I'm not surprised. Damar, Jordan, are you? They're probably the two I hear the most as well.
Yep. Absolutely right. I think that a majority of organizations right now are looking at how do I maximize efficiency with what I have, right? Or how do I do more with less? I think it ties back to some of those pieces within every facet, right? How do I accelerate more with the customers I'm bringing in? How do I accelerate more at times of renewal? How do I, accelerate more on and making sure I don't have any revenue leakage when it comes to things like invoicing and legal components? I think that entire process of just how do we do more with less and how do we move faster to keep up with the pace of our competitors, right? All of that is definitely something that I'm hearing across the board with our customers.
Yeah, and if we look a little bit closer, like working on my own project, and obviously I get heavily involved in quite complex transformation projects, and then some kind of not so complex. One thing we see is, yes, we all agree we want to achieve this, we want to respond to customers, we want to respond to business demands, but the reality is, this stuff is not easy. What we do is very, very challenging because there's many reasons organizations are struggling to take on these transformation projects, or like I felt, I really don't want to do this because it's more complex than I thought. But the crawl, walk, run approach is really small. Start small and then take that steps to the kind of focused areas on where you are. So some of the examples of where I see challenges when we're working with organizations is, You know, when they're looking at that sales experience across their different customers, they could be working across many different kind of environments, whether that's Salesforce, some of their users might be on Dynamics, people might be on AWS. They got the sparse amount of technology across the business. They're also trying to do this across multiple regions, you know, and it's so hard. I was doing like 4 different languages. It was a global project. I was dealing with multiple currencies. You know, you got governing laws, you got language issues, you got culture issues. You know, that adds so many layers of complexity. You could be dealing with multiple channels. Like we said, we know omni-channel is growing. Direct sales, self-service, distributors, partners. People are selling in so many different ways now because they have to respond and meet customers where they are. They've already got a host of technology. I know we went through our systems here in Congo and we had over 300 systems, and a lot of them, we didn't even know why we had them. They were just there. We inherited them. Someone in sales bought them, then someone in legal bought a different system. We've got kind of multiple revenue streams and then multiple different kind of products we're trying to sell. Physical products, service products, people moving into digital products. Complexity is hard, and many organizations have many of these, not just one. I had many. Damar, from your perspective, what types of challenges are you seeing as kind of the big call outs here, or even others that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at these, it's really, you kind of like going back to that game of sort of whack-a-mole, right? You kind of have to have the sort of end goal in mind and sort of what you're solving for, to Jordan's point, before you get, you know, to this point when you're like, you need to define. And I feel like a lot of companies just skip right to the, you know, the you know, stage 2 or 3. But I think if you don't realize that this is all the stuff under the hood that, you know, could be a deal stopper for you down the road, then you're not going to be, you know, well suited to make the right decisions, you know, moving forward. So I think understanding what the remit of you know, of the transformation is, understanding what all you have under the hood, taking that inventory of those 300 some odd systems is obviously an important thing, and having someone that man, you know, there's whole software, right, you know, now available for just tool management, right? The RevOps professional's biggest job is tool management. And if you're not privy to everything that's sort of every you know, every dimension of your organization is using to do, you know, the things on the, you know, this is a great checklist to me of, you know, do I have these things? Am I doing these things? Do I have, you know, are these going to be things that become gotchas later? Because it is cross-functional, but these may not be things that are in your purview, right? So unless you ask the right questions, unless you start doing that fact finding early and you know, digging in on, you know, even that middle one, right? The multiple systems. It's you know, it's so hard to get everyone happy, but if you don't consider that you have those 6 systems already in place before you start to add another one, then you're very much going to, you know, you're starting, you know, it's the horse before the cart. So I think you have to recognize, you know, what all is in place and take that inventory before you can jump to stage 2 or 3 where you're, you know, making decisions about what you're going to replace or put in place.
Yeah, and I think that's so key. Like a lot of times customers will ring us because they've seen a demo and they're so excited because they've seen a demo at an event and it can do all these things. Digital maturity is really important to understand. You know, at Congo, we do an assessment where we understand like the pain, where you have kind of pain, but we then try to understand, you know, your complexity of what you're trying to do, the digital maturity of how you do it today. How you do it, are you low, medium, or high risk how you're doing it? Same with the complexity, the step before is a low, medium, or high risk. And then what we want to do is work with you on base what we've learned on how complex what you're trying to get to, where you are in your digital maturity of how you do it today. It's now going to be what should you do now, next, and beyond. Because what you don't want to do is see a demo, get all excited about a demo, and then realize, like I got excited when I saw my CPQ demo. I so wanted guided selling. I wanted guided selling. I wanted my sales reps. I wanted to use that feature. When it came to the build, I didn't even have any guided selling rules. Okay. So I didn't even know what I was going to put in. The system could do it, but my business was nowhere ready. I had no rules. So I was sitting there kind of going, oh, okay. So my maturity on that level, getting just the products and pricing into a unified system that could be managed daily was step 1 for me. Getting salespeople to stop creating products and SKUs and inventing their own processes was step one for me. That was a culture change for me. Control on the product and price book, control on the salespeople, and the guardrails we put around it. They didn't like it, of course, because they were able to create stuff and discount and sell whatever they wanted to hit their commission, and I'd have no margin in a deal. So learning was hard. So yeah, there is those challenges. Jordan, kind of from your perspective, you know, what are some of the challenges that maybe you see on the legal side? I talked a little bit about some of the challenges I'm seeing on the kind of propose and quote side, you know, when it goes into kind of the struggles that legal might be having with this.
Yeah, so oftentimes we'll talk to legal folks first, right? On the initial of like, I need something because I need to get ready for an audit, right? Or I need something because I'm having challenges with the sales team, or they're updating things, or things are lost in email, and I want to have this system, right? But one of the first questions that we do is similar to the maturity pieces, right? It's like understanding, well, where's your business, right? What other parties? Because legal so often, right, is this middle group between all of these different cohorts of the vendor agreements and their customer agreements, and right, maybe some rogue sales reps trying to get some things into their MSAs. And so it's important, again, right, for that group to a group that maybe isn't has a huge tech stack, right? But thinking through, okay, well, what is the sales team utilizing, right? How are they going to go through that request process, and digging in and understanding, okay, well then how, you know, what is your procurement team working with? What is your finance team working with? Because again, all those systems are interconnected. And I think that that's one of the pieces that helps. Again, you don't need to do everything and have every system interconnected into a CLM, but it's important to think about those different facets of, I don't just need somebody to hold my contracts and get me for this next audit, or get me so that they can, you know, self-serve NDAs. That's cool. Or the redlining feature is really cool. The approvals piece is cool, but it's important to think about like, how do they all work together, and where am I today, and how do I get there? And I think that that's, you know, some customers start where legal teams don't have anything, and things are sometimes still in filing cabinets, and it's let's start with a repository and get you to where you need. Where others might have some basis of a CLM, and they're getting that pieces, and sales has kind of a request process. Maybe it's going a little blind. Okay, then maturity is a little bit higher. So I think it's important to know as customers, right? Where are you today in terms of your transformation? Where do you want to be? And then mapping them to that success, as you mentioned, Ash, because and then also, what are your big organization challenges, right? Are you launching new products that are going to affect some of the legal components? Are you planning on acquisitions that are going to affect a big impact on the legal side? So again, understanding the bigger business initiatives to what's coming down the funnel is really important as you go through the maturity process as well.
Yeah, I think it's always important to understand like what problem are you solving and for who, right?
Yeah,
like that's
exactly.
like those two things like that. It's like we could solve all the problems with this tool, but it's like, but is that a problem for the salesperson right now, or does that solve the legal person's problem? It's like, obviously you can't, you know, it's not an umbrella, you know, situation where you're solving everyone's problems with everything. But I think that you when you're solutioning, right, you should start to understand like, what am I solving and for whom, right? That to me is like how I try to like wrap my head around, you know, because this, I mean, to me, we could solve so many different challenges cross-functionally with, you know, with one within the context of revenue lifecycle, whether we're depending on who we're talking to.
Yeah, and it's also departments. I remember when we were doing our project where we really focused on like CPQ, and I remember we demoed it, and all the sales guys were so excited about it. They were like, "Oh, this tool's going to do these great things." And then our provider left the room, and then we had a finance director just turn around and go, absolutely not, we're not touching this tool. It's going to break my finance. It's going to break our ERP. It's going to ruin our ERP. It's not happening. And it was amazing that, again, because we focused on building for the department, we didn't focus on building for the business. And he could have killed that project very quickly, because what his problems, he wasn't just being annoying. However, it felt annoying at the time because I got so many people excited about the product. But the reality of it is his concerns were very real. Because he was right. I was implementing a new tool that was going to reframe how we propose, how we quote, how we do our SKUs, how we build all the products and services and pricing. He needs to run invoices off that. He cannot do that if we've invented a system and not thought about how he's going to get the data and how it's going to work with his system and his ERP. So that's when we talk about building for a business, not a department. So him being in that meeting was actually very crucial. And that's why revenue operations is all about this cross-functional collaboration, because what you don't want to have is go live, launch is a major problem for another department. because you weren't inclusive in your thinking of this end-to-end process. And I also had a problem where the CEO saw the CLM demo and all he thought was, our contracts are in drawers. We're not ready for that. So it was so advanced. He thought, Ash, we're in drawers. They're talking AI. And I'm going, which was ridiculous because our data was a mess, which meant AI is never going to happen. We can't even if we can't make sense of our data, a robot's not going to. Do you know what I mean? So it was literally, he almost killed the project based on fear because there wasn't a plan on where we are, where we want to get to. Here's the steps we need to go to. So these are the way you get buy-in from different stakeholders across the business who could kill your project very quickly by you not doing your homework. So situation analysis is really, really important, which is why we came up with the concept of revenue lifecycle. The reason I love it is I wish I had it. And it's not because I'm sitting there. We actually created this because what we do in around the revenue lifecycle is try to break it down into the core individual steps. So configure is the process of how I configure. I need to know, do I need a configuration engine to bundle all of my products, my options? You know, we have some customers where they have 20,000 line items on a quote, different variations of packages, bundles, and it's highly complex. Then I have other organizations that the products are not complex, but their pricing is really complex. So the idea of it is the revenue life cycle isn't about Conga at all. This is branded blue and a different color to Conga's colors because it's not about Conga. It's about the customer's process. And what we're trying to do is identify when it comes to propose and quote, is your challenges around how you configure, how you're managing pricing, how you manage options on, you know, discounting and, you know, all the different promotions, how you generate the proposal and document, how it gets approved by the right people, deal desks and the various different people to getting it to a customer. Like I said, someone could buy a CPQ tool and they don't need the configuration engine. They need the pricing engine because they've got vast complexity on pricing. Some have both. So the idea of these process steps is you don't use Conga for all of them. You might have one vendor here, another vendor there, someone else doing your CLM, someone else doing order management, a different billing system, revenue recognition. And what it is, it's like a heat map of problems. So what we try to do is work with an organization and say, well, your biggest problem is how you generate the proposal and quote. How do you make sure the data that goes into that proposal is accurate and it's right? And then how do you automate it to get it approved and sent to a customer in real time whilst on the phone with the customer? So that's all of, so what we do with this is the revenue lifecycle is really a process step map around the core features. And like I said, some organizations are not ready for a CPQ tool. They're not ready for a CLM, but they might be ready to generate contract templates and they'll start there and then they'll build into a CLM. So the idea of it is doing enough of a assessment of where you are. First, listen to your business, land on where the pain is, identify process, people, and then technology. Never start on the outside of the wheel where you're going technology first. That's where you'll happen, the big demo, all excited, and your business is not ready for it. So the idea of it is, and we work on with organizations on how to do transformation, start with the process, understand the people, what technology are they using today, and then score complexity, maturity, and is it a priority for now, next, and beyond? And follow that template around the revenue life cycle. Because if I was in legal and you're explaining to me, well, if we update this for the sales team, by the time we need to add the right clauses, generate the contract, negotiate the contract, get it approved and signed, and be able to store that contract where everyone can see it, that's where you then start to legal teams look and go, now I know that you're going to get this right, so I can do my job, and it can go to the finance team. So the revenue lifecycle for me is more about a map of trying to identify different pain points. Damar, like when we talk at that, because I know this is new for you, so it's quite great because I haven't presented this to you. Do you like the concept? And I'm happy to hear now of how we're trying to help customers kind of navigate their world versus getting excited about a demo.
Yeah, like, so I love this so much. Like, I screenshotted it and I want to steal it because for me, it's very similar to the way that Ziff sells the channel revenue lifecycle, right? We come in at a different part of the wheel, depending on what you need, right? And I think we oftentimes sell them the whole boat, right? They don't need the the enterprise edition. They just need something that really nails configuring the quote, right? What, like one piece of the pie. And so I think that I love that, you're not opinionated system wise as to where this needs to come from. And I think that is, I mean, that's the revenue operations professional's dream, is right. I bring my, BYO whatever tool and then plug it in, and it becomes a part of the bigger flywheel, which is, at the end of the day, all the customer wants is to be a seamless part of the rest of the flywheel.
Yeah. And Jordan, from your experience, like, I know we often start with customers and normally they come in and they're like, I just want to see CLM. I just want to see a contracting tool. And we could go down that road with them. But we're trying to say is, I have no problem. We're going to talk to you about the contracting tool. By just seeing the other areas, it does spark conversation. Can you just talk to a little bit about your interactions with customers and kind of how it's all about it's about them. It's not about the provider they're buying technology from. This has got to be their process and where they need to go.
Yeah, I think a big piece of it is when you first have a conversation, right? Going back to the legal example and a little bit of what you had mentioned, Ash. So just last week, right, where we're speaking to a customer that formerly had tried to implement a CLM solution, a legal group, right? And they're like, no one adopted it from sales, right? And so then, we get on the call with the sales leader, and again, going through and understanding, okay, well, first off, what are your initiatives? But hearing his perspective, like, I can't add more administrative work on my team. They just need to be able to shoot this over, right? So again, it goes back to, do we understand the how and the why? And then it actually really unfolded for him to be like, listen, they already spend an hour creating the entire quote and the proposal, and they're spending all this time on here. And so it unwound, right? It's like they're trying to solve for one process 2 steps ahead in their customer process, but really it comes back to here, right? And I think that's where so often, right, when we're trying to look at all of the managed tools, to Jamar's point, when we look at there's actual tools, right, to manage all of your tools, and you have all these things that are unadopted, it's because we go and we rush to try to figure out the pinpoint problem today. And we connect the pieces and processes. So this has been something that I've really enjoyed, because you're really taking a consultative approach to understand, okay, where are you as a business? Because I'm not going to tell you that the new features and functions and the flashy stuff that you can do, like guided selling with CPQ. I want to hear first of like, where are you today, right? Where's your business going? And then who is actually going to pass this off to, right? Sales goes to legal, legals goes to finance. We don't want to scare finance at the same note. So like, how do we actually intertwine these together? And customers, I think, have started to really resonate with that, because it's refreshing, right? To not just say, here's this new platform that can do all these bright ideas, or we're excited about a demo, but maybe how do we actually get the rest of the organization bought in? Or what is it actually tied to a business outcome, right? And how does this actually convert for myself? And I think a big piece of all of these things, of anything in revenue operations, it goes back to, how does this actually tie to the revenue intelligence, right? What is it going to do for my business if I get all of this CLM and the CPQ and these things intertwined? What is the measurable component? And I think that that's something that is a nice piece with the revenue lifecycle wheel, is as soon as you go down any of these paths, they're measurable and you can see the outcome that comes with it, which is a really nice facet whenever you have a tool to continue the buy-in and the change management, because you can exploit that, down funnel.
Yeah.
This is such a good visual. I got to say, like, I've been at so many organizations where they try to put in usage-based pricing before the product can measure usage. Like, this is a really good way to like cart horse, guys. Let's think through the whole thing. Quick time check. We have about 10 minutes left. So if people in the audience have questions, now's the time to ask them.
Thank you, Camilla. And yes, we're very open to questions. Like, we have done this, we've kind of got a huge amount of experience, and most of our jobs is all about helping people not make probably some of the mistakes that we made, and also like kind of take from our learnings. At the end of the day, the right hand side of the wheel is all about accelerating the buying and selling experience. The buying for the customer, the selling for obviously the employee, and the left hand side of the wheel is all about maximizing that customer experience once they've bought, completing obligations, delivering on orders, upselling, cross-sell things that they actually want, not spamming them with things they have no interest in. When revenue lifecycle is done well, it has many benefits for an organization. And I always challenge any company that produce statistics. So I'm very strict with Conga when we produce statistics like a 25% increase in win rate. I have a 1-word question: how? Like, what did they do to get a 25% increase on win rate? You know, a 28% increase on deal size. Well, then I'd look at it and go, well, and how now they configure price quote from one central CPQ engine. They have now guided setting rules. So even now their new sellers can now get prompts to say they're buying this, you should recommend this, or maybe give an option of this, or these need to be bought together. What happens is the reps are now more informed. You know, they're getting information whilst on the phone, prompts to make sure they're increasing and maximizing the revenue in every single opportunity. You know, speeding this, making sure contract accuracy is really important, because what you don't want to do is the sales guy's done a brilliant job in getting the right deal size, and then the legal teams come in and just bottleneck the whole thing because it's just too slow on contracting. They're doing it via email, they're sending stuff via Outlook. It's just a world of pain and nobody has visibility. So making sure that you're focused on measurable ROIs is really important. That's why we say this process is all about becoming automated, integrated, and intelligent. You will not get to intelligent if you haven't automated a lot of it and integrated the data and the systems. What are the type of business outcomes, Damara, that you're seeing that your customers are looking for? I know product and efficiency was a big one that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that, and you know, going back to Jordan's point around sort of the, you know, it's all about revenue intelligence at the end of the day. It's connectiveness of sort of, it's if you're gonna do the work to connect the data, right, and you're gonna do the integration, you're gonna go through all of this hullabaloo for sort of the stress that it takes to connect systems, because that's not always the easiest thing to do. Like, there's an end to that mean, and like, to me, that's the data that you get in the story that you can tell because of it. And if you don't, like, if that's not coming through at the end of the day for you, then you're missing out, right? Like, that's, you know, that's why we rolled up business intelligence to the business operations and RevOps group here, because we don't see them as two in the same. We see our revenue intelligence as a key sort of driver of our revenue processes and a sort of iterative kind of you know, flywheel back to the business. And if you don't have the data to tell you where to go, and therefore you don't have, you know, the integration set up the right way to help you do that, then I think that's, you know, that's obviously something that you know, we're all striving for, is you know, to be able to tell that data story at the end of the day.
And I'm going to land on your data story a little bit, Damara, and see if you're seeing some of the things. Like, one of the business outcomes is we're now using AI. You know, when people are going, we want to get to AI, that's our business outcome. I'm just like, well, hold on, firstly, where do you want to implement AI? What's it going to do for your business? Why do you think you need AI? Oh, I saw this AI tool and was able to do all these things. And I'm like, okay, you know, there's 3 stages to AI. You got to get your data ingestion and handling, then look to apply machine learning algorithms. Then you can look at remediation. But always kind of focus on the 3 steps, because remediation is, well, once I get this intelligence, what am I going to do with it? A robot's not telling me faster, quicker, or moving. So I don't know whether you see that a lot, where the outcome is, I want to do AI. And you're like, well, no, why do you want to do AI? Do you see that as well from people?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for us, you know, it's sort of that crawl, walk, run, right? If you don't have customers manually using their data in a good way because they trust it, like you said, how are you going to get a robot to make good decisions? And you know, the Gen AI or the sort of, you know, predictive insights, like, you don't want it predicting on bad data, right? So that's the easiest argument to make of, if as soon as it spits out a recommendation that you don't agree with, you're going to question the data, right? And so how do we get ahead of any of those gotchas in the data that help you not have to look like you don't know what you're talking about based off of the robot making the data decision, you know, for you? So I think it's, you know, it's definitely a progression, and we see it illuminated heavily by this new age of Gen AI, where it's already been figured out in these, you know, these large language models, you know, Chat GPT, whatever. But as soon as you get past a level of difficulty that's, you know, that's specific to your business, it falls apart, right? So that's where you have to have good data to get, you know, good insights.
Yeah. And one of the big outcomes, and Jordan, I'm going to land you a little on this one, and a lot of you landed on this call, was efficiencies and productivity. You know, how do I do more with less? And, you know, a lot of it is buying software that you can use in multiple different places. So don't have like, so we like a document generation tool. Do you want to talk a little bit about you buying software that many teams could benefit. So you can scale the software and across the business. Training becomes easier, and organizations can maximize the return from that investment.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest concerns, right? And Damar just touched on one of them, right? Is as you go through, it's easy to say, unify these teams, unify these processes, unify the systems. And then it starts to get hard when it's like, well, it's super hard to integrate this, right? It's very hard to integrate all of these different systems. And we have a CPQ, and then we have a document generation, then we have the CLM, and then we have an ERP and all of these things. So if you can utilize, a solution, right? Whether it's something as simple as a document generation to help you automate your renewals process, right? Help you on the customer side, and unifying and also helping you on your contract generation and your CLM, right? Is picking providers and solutions that can solve it. And then you can grow with the tool. Right? You know where you are on this revenue wheel, you know where you are in your phase of maturity, and you can grow and evolve with that without adding another tech stack, adding in another API code, trying to integrate and trying to make data come back and forth, because it takes so much work. And then all of a sudden someone leaves that was owning that, right? And it causes all this change. And you're like, I don't know, this person was owning it and I have no idea on this, right? So I think when also comes to training, right? A huge piece we hear all the time is like, I don't know how I'm going to get, the sales team to be bought into another tool, right? They already have such a big tech stack that they're utilizing every day, or we're trying to get them to utilize. You want me to add on another training to them and having them they're not adopting the ones that are currently in play. So I think it's important to figure out, how do I figure out a solution or a technology that can grow with me on all of these facets throughout this revenue wheel, or multiple facets of my customer journey, and using one product in multiple ways to help you streamline and kind of mitigate down that large tech stack and help the customer adoption down the line between your CRMs and your ERPs and your customer journey.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Now, we've talked a lot about revenue lifecycle, and many organizations start in different places. We do have a quick poll for you. After listening to challenges around sales, legal, finance, customer success, if you had to pick one quadrant that's the priority for your business, whether it's accelerating how you propose and quote, negotiate and execute on contracts, manage and fulfill those contracts, or renew and expand those contracts, what would be your biggest transformation priority right now, if you had to pick one?
While the poll is running and people are scrambling to fill out their answers, we did have a question about what company size do you typically see people start to adopt a more formal, structured framework? I think there's what size should it be, and what size do you normally see?
One thing I find with revenue lifecycle, and I'll let the other guys answer as well. For me, every organization has a process in how they propose and quote. Everyone has products and services and stuff they've got to sell. There's normally a B2B, there's normally a contract somewhere involved, finance and that. I always say every organization should look at this and see, where are we on this? If it's a more simple organization, you should still be looking at it and going, have I got a centralized price book? Because you're going to grow. So you need to have I might only have 10 SKUs in there. That's okay. But it's centralized, it's clean, it's understood by the business. Even if it's only 10 reps, it's still understood by the business. I have a set contract, so I'm legal and I'm compliant. So for me, I would just make sure, as you go around this wheel, how automated, how integrated and intelligent it is. You'll move quicker around the wheel the smaller you are, but I would say every organization should look at it and try to standardize a clear process for each step. And then as they get bigger, it's easy to add more products, it's easy to add more services, it's easy to add different contracts. As you grow, it will just become more complex. But I think every organization should know exactly where they are and how they do each of these 4 quadrants. Damar, I don't know what you see.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it's about one word, and it's, if you're small, if you're big, whatever, if you're not doing some of these things, like scale is going to be something that is important to your exec team. And if they don't get that, if they don't want to go from 50 to 250, or from 5 to 10 to 50 or whatever it is, like then they aren't interested in scaling their business upwards. And all the big businesses, anyone that gets to a level of maturity beyond where you may be today, needs to be able to do that, right? And so scaling your business is really kind of key.
And that kind of answers the follow-on question, which is how to get your executive team to care. And I think, Damar, you you placed it right in that lane where you tie everything to the overall company goals and how it impacts the company goals. Another way to do that, in my experience, is if you've had a customer impacted by a lost contract, or you haven't been able to bill someone because you can't find the contract to back up what you said, any kind of call recording, any kind of thing where you can actually get the customer talking and put that in front of the executive, it makes it much more visceral, and they start to like feel bad things. Anything you all would like to add about that before we wrap up?
I think the biggest piece I was going to say is it all compares to where is your complexity. So you can start anywhere, right? We work with organizations that have 100 employees that are just getting started on revenue lifecycle and thinking about how they begin the process of scalability, up to, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 organizations that are having massive complexity and that have really dynamic components, right? I think it's just taking you where you are. And that's why we really focus on maturity assessments to see where is an organization today? What are some goals that would be good to have? And then also it ties back to everything to what is the ROI, right? What are you trying to get out as a business outcome? And then we tie that intelligence back. So I think it's important to anyone for an exec team, right? Especially as we're pounding on at times, right, where there's maybe some economic uncertainty of like, hey, we need to do this project, but why, right? And how is this going to help us in the line? And selling that, I think, can be difficult when you tie it back to some of those data. I think it can be a little bit helpful to continue that forward.
All right, it's time to wrap up. I think we have a final slide with links to resources. I want to thank everyone here. I love the QR codes, super simple for people to use while on this presentation. So I want to thank everybody here for being panelists and giving such great information. I know that I screenshotted that one slide and I'm going to use it myself. So thank you all, and thank you for attending. Those folks in the audience, we will be sending out the recording, and I'm sure we'll have some access to the slides at least.
Yeah.
For those of you who attended. So thank you everyone so much, and have a great day.
Thank you guys. It was really great. Thank you.
Everyone.
Everyone.